What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Did you know that 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed? I would like to get that number down. That would really help me out a lot. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs by the time next season starts. I think that's a very, very achievable goal. Have a couple of months left to do that. So if you are not subscribed and you watch this channel regularly, please consider hitting that button down below. It would really help me out a lot. It would mean a lot to me, and I think that would be a nice thing to be able to get to 1,000 by the time next season starts. So thank you guys all for your support over the past couple of weeks. It's been great seeing the view counts go up, and I'm happy with the support that we've gotten, but we're going to continue to try to climb higher. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So today we're going to talk about the Portland Trail Blazers, continuing along with our offseason breakdown series. This is kind of a weird time to be talking about the Blazers, of course, given all of the Damian Lillard stuff that has gone on in the news over the past couple of days. Just so everyone is clear, I'm recording this at about 5 p.m. on July 17th. This is Saturday, so that's where we're at with Dame right now. He did have that big press conference yesterday on Friday, kind of talking about where he's at with the team. He made it pretty clear that he wanted them to be aggressive this offseason, making some upgrades to the roster, but there has been no trade request as of yet. That could happen if he's unhappy with the way that free agency and the draft have gone for the team, in a couple of weeks, once we kind of see where their moves are at. But something has to give one way or the other. It's either going to be Dame requesting a trade, or it's going to be the Blazers being very, very aggressive in upgrading the rest of the roster around him. You can't just run the same team back next year. Lillard himself has made it very, very clear that that's not going to be acceptable. So that's where we're at with those two sides there. Just so everyone's clear, as I'm recording this, there has not been a trade request, but things can happen very, very quickly in the NBA, as we know. So tomorrow things might be completely different by the time you see this, but as of right now, that's where we're at with Dame. So here is the cap sheet. As I said, I expect this to change significantly. They're going to be altering the roster this offseason one way or the other, and I would expect that a lot of these players could potentially be on the move. They also have some free agents they have to deal with as well, so that's another aspect to this. But here's Dame. He's under contract for 4 more seasons, and so, if he did come with a trade request, I guess the team doesn't have to grant it, but it seems like they probably would, just considering that they want to do right by him. He's given the franchise plenty of chances to make a competitive roster, and they've been okay. They've been a playoff team for the last, 6-7 years, but unfortunately they just haven't really been able to get over the hump and really compete with the best of them in the Western Conference. So I would anticipate that if there is a trade request at any point, then they would grant it and he would be moved, even with the 4 years remaining on his contract. But that's going to be hanging over the franchise head the entire offseason, and we'll just have to see how things work out with that. CJ McCollum has 3 more years on his contract. He is 29 years old. That's one that's, likely to potentially be moved if there is, not a Dame trade. They're going to have to shuffle the pieces around him, and McCollum and Dame have been, every offseason for the past 5 or 6 years, it's been the will they, won't they, will they break up that backcourt. It's pretty clear the limitations there with them. They're not great defensively, and so it kind of creates a weakness there, other opposing guards being able to take advantage of that, as well as, both having similar skill sets offensively. Obviously, McCollum is very talented, but he maybe is not the best fit next to Damian Lillard. If you can trade him for somebody who's a little bit better defensively, maybe, a guy with a little bit more size on the wing, that would be ideal. So a CJ trade could potentially be in the works. If not, pretty much everybody else has to go. Robert Covington, Nurkic, Norman Powell, Derek Jones, those are all trade pieces. So if you do keep McCollum around, then they have to definitely be, cashing in some draft picks and other stuff elsewhere on the roster in order to really upgrade and see what they can do there. But I would, I don't know if he's going to be traded or not. A lot of it depends on circumstance, but definitely a possibility. So these are all the trade pieces for them, that are currently roster players. Robert Covington, he's been flipped a couple of times over the past few seasons. Covington is a good player. He's a 3-and-D type guy. He's shown his value at points over the past couple of years, but he also is pretty inconsistent with his outside shot, and his defense is maybe a little bit overrated by some fans. He's entering in, an expiring contract for next season, and I would not be shocked at all to see him traded. There's a reason that he's been moved a couple of times over the past few years, and the Blazers have to make some moves, and he would be a likely guy that would be included in some sort of trade. So whether you're getting picks back for him and then you use those picks in a different trade to upgrade somewhere else, or if you're just trading him for a different player that you feel like might fit a little better, I would anticipate fully that Robert Covington is moved before the start of next season. I think that one seems pretty likely. Jusuf Nurkic is non-guaranteed for next year. He's talked a lot in the media and on Twitter and stuff. We heard a report that if Dame is out, then he would be as well, just because he would not want to return to Portland if Lillard wasn't there, and that makes sense. They'd probably enter a rebuild anyway. And he, he's 26 years old, has not quite been the same since that broken leg that he suffered a couple of years ago, but he's still a nice player, and on that expiring contract for $12 million, I don't anticipate he will be cut, even though that's non-guaranteed. I think it's more likely that he could potentially be traded. Again, he's another piece. It's making a decent amount of salary that could be included in a trade, maybe get you something decent back for him. So that's one that I would also look out for. Norman Powell has a player option. It is widely expected that he will decline that and enter free agency and get a big pay raise. They traded for him at the deadline, and at the time it was like, okay, obviously they're going to bring him back in the offseason, but now, there's been a big wrench thrown into their plans, and he may not be a guy that they re-sign. I think they probably will want to, but it really depends on what other moves are out there for them, what other trades they're capable of making, who they might target in the draft if they can get a pick or something like that. But Norman Powell is a guy who I could see going either way. He's going to get a raise on that $11 million salary. He's going to be making, $20 million-ish, maybe a little bit more. He's a really good player, and he's one of the better scorers on the market this free agency, so I do feel like he's a guy who's going to get a big raise this offseason, and whether that's with Portland or with a different team, I don't know. Maybe you can work out a sign and trade, but you do kind of have to keep the asset, especially because this team is not working with much right now. Derrick Jones Jr. is another one that I could easily see being traded this offseason. He's making almost $10 million on an expiring contract. That's a prime number to be thrown into a trade. If they are making some moves, then he could be a guy that another team sees with a lot of upside, only 24 years old. Has shown some growth in his game over the past couple of seasons, so that would be one that I would also anticipate to be heavily shopped around. Specifically, those three, Covington, Nurkic, and Derrick Jones. All three of those guys are going to be in trade rumors all offseason long because Portland's going to be looking to upgrade whatever way they can, and those are the most obvious ways to do it. Obviously, McCollum as well, but he is signed long-term, and they may want to keep him around on the roster just because you might not see a great offer out there for him. But I think specifically Covington, Nurkic, and Jones are going to be the three that they're looking to trade more so than anybody else on this roster just because they have to make an upgrade to please Lillard, and that's what they're going to try to do. A couple of free agents here. Zach Collins entering restricted free agency. He has been absolutely plagued by injuries over the past couple of seasons. He has played, this will be his 5th year in the NBA upcoming. He didn't play at all this past season. The year prior, he only played 11 games. He has not been able to stay on the floor. He's had multiple ankle surgeries, multiple foot surgeries, just dealing with a lot of issues down there. And so who knows if he'll ever even be able to play. I don't know if another team wants to take a chance on him. If I'm Portland, I'd probably just let him walk. Maybe you can work out a sign and trade, but there's probably not much value there just considering he hasn't been on the court in 2 years. So I doubt there you can get much for Zach Collins. I honestly think that he'll probably end up leaving, getting like a 1-year prove-it deal somewhere on one of the teams that is rebuilding, take a chance on his upside, and hope that he can stay healthy. A team like Detroit, OKC, Houston, whoever. But I think for Portland, they're more it's going to be better for them to use their cap space on guys who they know can contribute, simply because they're in win now mode right now. Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony, both these veterans entering free agency as well. Kanter is in his 2nd stint with the team. I would not be surprised if they brought him back. I think he's an okay piece, and he could be a little bit cheaper, a budget center option there, especially if you're trading away Nurkic. It could pay to have a guy who's a little bit cheaper of an option at the 5-man spot on the roster here. Kanter's nice. He's not great defensively, as we know, but offensively he's very gifted, and so he would be a guy that I think they should probably end up keeping around if you don't have to pay him too much. He might end up getting a little bit money in free agency, whether he's a mid-level guy or maybe a little bit more than that. If you can get him on a minimum, I think that's a steal. Otherwise, it's not a bad idea to try to retain a guy like Kanter if you're trying to at least be competitive. Carmelo Anthony, we've heard a lot of rumors about him and the Lakers potentially. I think that would make sense for both sides there. Him going to play with LeBron and being, a bench role for them. He is 37 years old, but he's still a good player. He can score. He's still got the mid-range jumper, of course. He's former All-Star, former All-NBA caliber player, and he's still got a lot of those moves, even though he's not doing it at the same, efficiency and production rate that he was, of course, a couple of years ago when he was really, really good. But, you can never go wrong with veterans who have All-NBA pass because it generally, they can end up contributing if they accept the role. And credit to Carmelo Anthony, he has really accepted a bench role over the past season. He's given up a lot of his his kind of qualms in the past where he really didn't want to come off the bench, but now he's been very okay with that over the past year or so, and I got to give him a lot of credit for being willing to step into a role. So I think it would be important for Portland to bring him back. He's been good for them the past 2 years, and I think he makes sense and he fits alongside what this roster is doing, but they are going to make a lot of changes this offseason, and if he wants to go somewhere else, I don't necessarily blame him for that. So we will see on Carmelo, but he's another one that I would think that they should try to bring him back, just because they do need those veterans who are willing to sacrifice for the good of the team, being willing to come off the bench, and guys with a lot of talent, and it's clear that Carmelo does still have all of that talent from a couple of years ago when he was really, really good. Got a couple of younger guys down here at the bottom of the roster. Would not be surprised at all to see some of these guys traded. This is really where their assets are at. They do have future firsts as well that they can potentially throw into trades, but these two guys, Anthony Simons and Nasir Little, although they both, are contributors right now, I think their value is probably high, and they can get, potentially get a veteran who's more capable on the court than these two are at the moment. Simons is up for an extension on his rookie contract, although I doubt the Blazers give it to him given the uncertainty surrounding the team right now. He is 22 years old, entering the final season of his rookie deal. Would not be surprised if he's traded at all. Same with Nasir Little. Both of these guys still on rookie contracts, cheap. I could see them being used as assets to potentially try to trade for a veteran. Harry Giles took the one-year prove-it deal on the minimum salary. He was never really that good for them this year. Was a guy who was really highly regarded coming out of college and then as a prospect, but dealt with a lot of injuries and stuff in college, and he slipped in the draft and has not been great so far in the NBA. He just didn't really get much of a chance to be on the floor. Now maybe next season, especially if they trade Nurkic, that kind of could open up a hole for him at that big man spot. So maybe they want to bring him back and see if he can prove anything. He is only 23, so still a little bit of improvement left for him to do, but I'm not entirely sure if they're going to want to bring him back, given that he didn't really find a role on this team this past season. It was kind of the prove-it deal for him, and to be honest, he didn't really prove much. He just kind of was a similar player to what we saw in Sacramento. CJ McCollum, also a guy who could potentially be traded. He's only 21 years old, on that rookie contract. I don't anticipate him having too high of a value, but he could maybe be a throw-in if you want to upgrade a little bit. Teams could view him as some sort of positive asset, as a guy who was a recent draft pick and still young. So we'll see on him, but he's another guy who could be thrown into a trade. And then Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is actually a guy who I think they should bring back. At 26 years old, he kind of bounced around a little bit this year. Never really found a home, but did latch on in Portland a little bit near the end of the season and was kind of in the rotation going down the stretch. So I think he's a guy that they should probably bring back. He's like a versatile, switchable wing defender guy, kind of what this team needs. He's not amazing. Obviously, there's a reason that nobody really scooped him up, but he is a decent option, and especially on a minimum salary, I think that's probably worth it. And then TJ Leaf and Keljin Blevins, both on those two-way contracts. Neither of them played much at all this year. I don't really have an opinion on either of those players. I think they're both okay, but you'd probably be better served using those two-way contracts on somebody else, maybe a guy with a little bit of a higher upside, because neither of them really were able to get on the floor this season, neither Leaf nor Blevins, and so I think it makes sense to kind of go in a different direction there. So for the Blazers this offseason, it's all going to be about making Dame happy, and if they're not making steps to do that, then it's pretty clear that he's going to go in the direction of requesting a trade. I think, he said it pretty clearly in his press conference yesterday. He wants to remain in Portland. He has always wanted to stay with the Blazers for his whole career, and I think that's very admirable for him wanting to do that, but, there also comes to a point where this team has not really been, a title contender at all for their time. They've been okay. They've been a good playoff team, but I don't think there was ever really a point during this run where you could look at this team and say, yeah, they have a chance to win the title, because the ceiling is just not super high on them. Obviously, Lillard's great. He's doing everything he can, but they just have not really put some great pieces around him in order to succeed. They do have some stuff to trade, like I said, Simons, Little, Ellaby, plus a bunch of future draft picks, as well as Covington, Nurkic, Derek Jones. You can maybe do a sign and trade with Norman Powell. Even Harry Giles could be a sign and trade guy if somebody else wants to feel like he has potential, but I doubt it. So you do have some pieces that you can move around. And they're going to have to, they're going to be making some moves this offseason. I just don't know if they'll be able to be successful enough to really convince Lillard to stay long term. But regardless, there's going to be some changes in Portland this offseason. It's going to happen, because it's down to a point where they have to bring in some help for him, and if they don't, then he's going to ask for a trade. And I think that's he made that pretty clear yesterday, and that's where we stand, and that's just going to be the deal in Portland this offseason. As far as potential moves for them go, I like the Ben Simmons thing. I think it makes sense for both sides to do a Ben Simmons for CJ McCollum swap. I think that makes perfect sense. Simmons would be a guy who I think would fit well next to Lillard. He, is a good defender. That is exactly what this team needs. I know the lack of the jump shot. I know all the problems with him in the playoffs, blah, 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 blah. But it really does make sense for me to do that swap for both teams. And Philly needs a shot creator. Now, the Sixers are probably going to ask for you to throw more in. You can include a couple of future first, maybe one of the younger guys on this roster. You can throw in Nurkic or Covington if they want him, Derek Jones, whoever, and just try to make something happen for Ben Simmons, because I do think that one is something that works for both sides, because, clearly those are two teams that need a change, and I think it would be beneficial. Other than that, just looking for potentially, getting something for Covington, Nurkic, Jones, throw picks onto those guys, see if you can upgrade any way you can. I don't know who's out there for them. We're not really entirely sure who's potentially available on the trade market this offseason, but they're going to have to do it through trades because they're not going to have cap space. And the cap space they do have is going to be, used up on Norman Powell's extension, and they won't be able to sign anybody in free agency. So it's going to have to be through trades, and they have some assets to go out and make things happen. It's just up to the front office to committing to doing that, because they want to keep Damian Lillard, and I'm sure that they do want to keep him, but they have to, prove and commit that they want to do that. And then if he does request a trade, I think it's kind of its own thing. Honestly, it's kind of another topic entirely. Every team in the league would make an offer. The other 29 teams would call the Blazers and give them their best pitch. Out of, in terms of who has the best things to give up, really depends. If Lillard comes out with a list of teams that he would like to go to, then I'm sure that they would do right by him and send him to one of those destinations. There's teams out there with cap space that can take him in without sending salary back. Obviously, your mind goes right to the New York Knicks, and that's been a rumored destination. The Miami Heat are also going to have cap space to take him on. Maybe the Dallas Mavericks would. There's teams out there with multiple first-round picks in this year's draft that could potentially make an offer, specifically the Golden State Warriors with 7 and 14, James Wiseman, Andrew Wiggins to make the salary work, a bunch of their other players, future assets, all that stuff. I think that would be an intriguing option. A lot of people are going to go to the Lakers and the Clippers, but neither of them really have the draft picks in order to make something happen. I mean, they could give every future asset away, and it still probably wouldn't be a competitive offer with what the rest of the league has to give up. Maybe there could be a Ben Simmons for Dame Lillard move if Portland wants to get him back, get Ben Simmons back and still try to remain at least a little bit competitive, even if they're not going to be as good. We'll see. There's a lot of potential options out there for him. We're not to that point yet, but if it does happen, then that's kind of, I'll probably make a video breaking that down if there is a Dame Lillard trade request, because that's pretty seismic. As of right now, it's looking like, it's trending in a direction where he's going to want to remain on the team. We kind of have already talked about this, but they do have to make some moves, and I anticipate they will. But yeah, that's all I have on the Portland Trailblazers. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about Dame Lillard and the Trailblazers and everything that's going on with them right now. Who are they going to potentially trade for? Would love to hear some potential targets in the comments down below. And like I said, 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed. So let's get that number down. Please subscribe if you are not already. I would really appreciate that. With all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.